The alarm clock buzzed faintly on the nightstand, but Anna had already been awake for hours. She lay staring at the ceiling of her small apartment, listening to the faint hum of traffic outside. The morning light seeped through the curtains, pale and gray, casting soft shadows across the room. On the table beside her bed lay a stack of unopened envelopes, bills, reminders, the heavy weight of obligations she had grown used to ignoring because facing them made her chest tighten. She sighed, rolled onto her side, and pressed her palms together, whispering the same prayer she always did, for strength, for clarity, for courage to face another day. She never asked for wealth. She never even dared to imagine a life of financial ease. All she wanted was peace, a sense that her struggles were not in vain. That morning, something felt different. It wasn't anything grand or obvious, just a subtle shift, like the air itself was softer, carrying a note of calm she hadn't felt in a long time. She dressed slowly, pulling on her worn sweater and jeans, then tied her hair back before heading out the door. Her job at the small cafe down the street paid little, but it was enough to keep her going. Still, the gnawing anxiety of not knowing how she would manage the rent next month followed her everywhere like a shadow. On her walk to work, Anna decided to cut through the park, a shortcut she rarely took because it reminded her too much of a life she didn't have. The joggers in their expensive athletic wear, parents pushing strollers, elderly couples feeding pigeons without a worry in the world. She walked briskly, her hands shoved deep into her pockets, when a flash of movement caught her eye. There, on the wooden bench near the fountain, lay a book. Its cover fluttered as the wind turned its pages back and forth. No one seemed to notice it, though dozens of people passed by. Anna slowed her steps. She glanced around. Was someone nearby, perhaps having left it behind temporarily? But there was no one, only the book, waiting. She approached cautiously, as if it might disappear if she moved too quickly. The title, written in elegant gold letters, stopped her in her tracks. The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence Scovel. She had never heard of it before. Her fingers brushed the cover, cool under her touch. She hesitated, torn between leaving it there and picking it up. Something in her heart urged her forward. She sat on the bench, the morning sun warming her back, and opened to a random page. The sentence she read seemed to leap straight into her soul. God's plan for you is permanent abundance. The unexpected happens, and your desires are fulfilled. Her breath caught. She read the line again, her lips moving silently, almost afraid she might break the spell if she spoke too loudly. Permanent abundance for someone like her, who counted every penny, who carried debt like a stone on her shoulders. The idea seemed almost cruel. And yet the words stirred something deep, a flicker of hope she hadn't allowed herself in years. She turned another page, reading about faith, about affirmations, about trusting God to provide in ways beyond human imagination. Anna tucked the book into her bag, her heart pounding. The rest of the day at the cafe passed in a blur. She poured coffee, cleared tables, smiled at customers, but her mind kept drifting back to the words she had read. That night she sat by the dim light of her bedside lamp and devoured the first chapters. Florence wrote about the power of words, about aligning thoughts with divine truth, about trusting that unseen forces were already at work to bring blessings into one's life. It sounded strange, even naive, but it also felt strangely familiar, like something she had always known but had forgotten. Her eyes lingered on one affirmation: I am open to receive God's blessings in unexpected ways. Anna closed the book slowly. The words echoed inside her chest, gentle but insistent. She folded her hands in prayer, whispering the line aloud, her voice trembling. I am open to receive God's blessings in unexpected ways. The mirror is something else entirely, almost foolish. but something about speaking the words filled the room with warmth. She lay back on her pillow, the book resting on her nightstand, and for the first time in months, she fell asleep without the heavy weight of dread pressing against her ribs. Outside her window, the city hummed and stirred, indifferent to her whispered prayer. But somewhere unseen, threads were already shifting, weaving together events she could not yet imagine. Money she had never asked for, blessings she didn't think herself worthy of, and opportunities beyond her wildest dreams were beginning to stir like seeds pushing against the soil after a long winter. She didn't know it yet, but that simple moment, the choice to pick up a forgotten book, the decision to speak a line of faith aloud, had already changed everything. And in the stillness of that night, as Anna slept peacefully, the universe conspired to surprise her in ways that would leave her breathless. Anna woke to the sound of her phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. She groaned, thinking it was another reminder from the bank or an overdue notice. For weeks her mornings had started with small jolts of dread like this. She reached for the phone, her eyes still half shut, and tapped the screen. A notification flashed in bold letters across the display. Deposit received. She blinked once, then again, convinced she was imagining it. Her checking account had just increased by a figure so large it made her sit upright, heart hammering against her chest. "No, that has to be wrong," she whispered into the quiet room. The number looked surreal, more than she could make in a year at the cafe. She rubbed her eyes and checked again. It wasn't a dream, it was real. Panic set in. Was it a glitch? Some mistake that would later be reversed, leaving her worse off than before? Her hands shook as she dialed the bank's number. She listened to the monotonous hold music, her mind racing through scenarios. Maybe it was fraud. Maybe someone else's money had landed in her account by accident, and they'd come clawing it back any moment. Finally, a calm voice answered, "Yes, Miss Petrova." The representative said after running her details, "The deposit is legitimate. It's an inheritance transfer, cleared through probate. I see here it's from a distant relative, one Sergei Pavlov." Anna frowned. Sergei Pavlov. I barely remember him. He was my grandmother's cousin, maybe. "Yes, ma'am." The voice replied kindly. "It appears you were named in his will years ago. The process was tied up in legal delays, but the funds have now been released to you. They're yours, free and clear." She dropped the phone onto the bed, her hand trembling. Her mind replayed the words over and over. "They're yours, free and clear." A sob broke from her chest, sharp and unrestrained. Tears blurred her vision as she clutched the thin blanket around her shoulders. For so long, she had fought simply to keep her head above water, and now, out of nowhere, this. Still shaking, she stood and stumbled to the small table where the book lay. The game of life and how to play it sat there, as though waiting, patient and unassuming. She opened it with trembling fingers and found the line she had whispered the night before. "I am open to receive God's blessings in unexpected ways." Her lips parted, and a soft laugh slipped out between her tears. Is this really happening, Lord?" she whispered. "I didn't ask for this. I only asked for strength, but you gave me more." That day she walked through the world in a daze. At the cafe, her coworkers noticed her distracted smile. "What's gotten into you, Anna?" one of them teased, nudging her elbow as they prepared lattes. "Nothing," she replied, shaking her head, but her grin lingered. How could she explain? How could she tell them that the weight she had carried for years had suddenly begun to lift? She didn't want to boast. Instead, she tucked the secret into her heart like a fragile treasure. But the blessings didn't stop there. A week later, Anna returned home from work to find a letter slipped under her door. She bent to pick it up, frowning. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Inside was a check from a publishing house she had long forgotten about. Years ago, she had submitted a small piece of writing to a community anthology. It had been accepted, but the project had fallen apart. Now, unexpectedly, the book had been revived, and her contribution included. The royalties, though modest, were more than she ever dreamed of receiving. Her laughter filled the empty apartment. She pressed the check to her chest, spinning once in the middle of her tiny kitchen. "Thank you," she whispered again, her voice breaking. "I see it now. I see what you're doing." Days later, another surprise awaited her. A knock came at her door, and when she opened it, she saw a familiar face, Mikhail, an old friend she hadn't seen in years. His expression was sheepish as he held out an envelope. "Anna," he said, his voice low, "I've owed you this for far too long. Remember when you lent me money to fix my car? I never forgot. Life finally turned around for me, and, well, here it is. Every cent." Anna stared, stunned. She had written that debt off long ago, never expecting to see it again. She took the envelope slowly, her throat tightening. "Mikhail, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," he interrupted, meeting her eyes with a firmness that silenced her. "You helped me when no one else would. I couldn't live with myself until I repaid you." After he left, she sat on her couch, holding the envelope, her heart swelling with gratitude. Again, she glanced at Florence Scovel's book on the table. As if it were a doorway to some greater truth she was only beginning to understand. She opened it at random, and her eyes fell on another affirmation. "Infinite Spirit, open the way for great abundance. I am an irresistible magnet for all that belongs to me by divine right." Her voice was stronger this time as she read it aloud. "I am an irresistible magnet for all that belongs to me by divine right." She felt the words settle into her bones, warm and powerful. By the end of the month, Anna's financial landscape looked nothing like it had before. The bills were paid, the rent was secure, and for the first time in years she even had savings. But beyond the relief, beyond the numbers in her account, was a deeper revelation. God had answered her, not because she begged for money, but because she trusted him, because she whispered that she was open to receive. Lying in bed one evening, she reflected on everything that had unfolded. She thought of the book abandoned on the park bench, of the strange peace that had urged her to pick it up. She thought of the inheritance, the royalties, the returned debt. None of it was coincidence. It was orchestration. It was grace. Her hands folded together, her eyes closing in prayer. "I see now," she whispered. "I never asked for riches, but you knew what I needed. You knew the right time, the right way, and I will not waste this blessing. I will use it to bring light where there was darkness, for others, as you have done for me." Outside, the city pulsed with its usual rhythm, but inside Anna's heart, a new song had begun. A melody of trust, gratitude, and abundance flowing where once there had only been lack. Weeks turned into months, and Anna found herself living a life she could scarcely recognize. The tension in her shoulders had eased, the constant knot in her stomach had unraveled. Each morning she woke not with dread, but with quiet anticipation, as if the world itself had shifted to welcome her. Her apartment, once dim and heavy with worry, now glowed with warmth. Fresh flowers often sat on the table, small luxuries she allowed herself without guilt. The bills were paid on time, sometimes even early, and she no longer had to choose between groceries and rent. But more than the money, it was the sense of peace that transformed her. She carried herself differently, smiling more often, meeting strangers' eyes instead of looking away. The people at the cafe, where she still worked, noticed it immediately. "You've changed, Anna," her coworker Lena said one afternoon as they cleaned the espresso machine. "You walk around like you've discovered some secret the rest of us don't know." Anna only laughed softly. "Maybe I have," she replied, glancing out the window where the sunlight spilled across the street. But it's not really a secret. It's more like trusting that life is bigger than our worries. Lena raised an eyebrow, but didn't press further. Yet Anna could tell her words lingered in her friend's mind. That Sunday, Anna sat in the back pew of the small neighborhood church she hadn't visited in months. As the choir sang, she felt a pull inside her chest, a whisper urging her to share what had happened. At first, the idea terrified her. Who was she to stand before others and speak of blessings? She was no preacher, no theologian. But as the pastor invited members of the congregation to offer testimonies, her legs moved of their own accord. Her heart pounded as she walked to the front, every step feeling like a leap into the unknown. When she turned to face the gathered faces, some familiar, some not, her throat tightened. For a moment words failed her. Then, slowly, she began. For a long time, she said, her voice trembling, I lived with fear of bills, of losing my home, of never having enough. I thought my prayers were too small, that maybe God had forgotten me. But then something happened. I found a book by accident, or maybe not by accident at all. It spoke of trusting God, of being open to receive blessings, even when we don't ask for them. She paused, and a hush filled the sanctuary. The night I first read those words, I whispered them before I went to sleep. Just once, I said, I am open to receive God's blessings in unexpected ways. And the very next morning, my life began to change. Money came that I never expected, debts were repaid, opportunities appeared out of nowhere. I never prayed for wealth, I only prayed for strength. But God gave me more than I dared imagine. A murmur spread through the room. Some eyes glistened with tears. Others watched intently, as if her words stirred something long buried. Anna's own eyes filled, but her voice grew steadier. I tell you this not to boast, but to remind you blessings come when we least expect them. Not always in the form we think we want, but always in the form we truly need. And if He could surprise me, He can surprise you too. Don't close the door to what God can do. When she stepped down, the pastor clasped her hand with a knowing smile. That was a gift, Anna, he whispered. From that day on, word of her testimony spread quietly. Friends began to ask her about the book, about the prayer she spoke, about how they could find peace in their own storms. Anna never claimed to have all the answers, but she shared what she could, always pointing back to faith, always reminding them that it wasn't about chasing money, but about opening their hearts. One evening, she sat at her kitchen table with her neighbor, an older woman named Irina, who had lived alone for years. Irina confessed she was behind on her rent and feared eviction. Anna listened, her chest aching with empathy. Then, without hesitation, she reached for her checkbook and wrote an amount that covered more than a month's rent. Take it, Anna said gently, pressing the slip of paper into her neighbor's trembling hands. This is not mine alone. It's God's blessing flowing through me to you. Irina wept openly, clutching Anna's hands as though she were a lifeline. You don't know what this means to me, she whispered. But Anna did know. She understood now that blessings were never meant to stop with one person. They were rivers, not ponds, always meant to flow onward, to nourish others, to spread hope where despair had taken root. As months turned into a year, Anna's life blossomed in ways she never anticipated. She started a small community group, meeting once a week at the cafe after hours. People came, single mothers, students, retirees, all carrying their own worries, their own burdens. Together, they read from Florence Scovel's writings, shared stories of unexpected kindness, and spoke affirmations aloud with trembling but hopeful voices. The cafe, once just a workplace, became a place of transformation. One evening, as the group repeated the affirmation, I am open to receive God's blessings in unexpected ways." Anna looked around the room and felt her chest swell with quiet joy. She realized she no longer stood alone. What had begun with a forgotten book on a park bench had rippled outward into something far greater than herself. Later that night, as she sat by her window watching the city lights flicker against the sky, she whispered a prayer of gratitude. "I see it now, Lord. The blessing was never just about money. It was about faith, about love, about the courage to believe again. Thank you for choosing me, for surprising me, for teaching me to give as freely as I receive." In that moment, Anna understood the full truth. The real wealth was not in her bank account, but in the lives she touched, the hope she restored, the faith she inspired. The money had come and would continue to come, but its purpose was always larger than her. She closed her eyes, the city humming softly around her, and felt a deep, unshakable peace settle into her soul. She hadn't asked for this blessing, but God, in His infinite wisdom, had given it anyway, and that was the greatest miracle of all.